Is that the 12?
That's me.
Good evening. This is the Wednesday, June 5th, 2024 Policy Committee meeting. Call to order. Mrs. Shope, could you do a roll call, please?
Yes. Tom Hankins,
Here.
Amy Levy, here, and Brian Nichols.
Here.
All members are present.
And also, Board President Johnson, thank you for being here. Before we get an approval of the agenda, I wanted to request a special policy meeting a week from tonight at 5 p.m. faux pas, 5 p.m. to 6 or whatever, to totally review the code of conduct policy, the revisions, and kind of go from there. I know that was discussed a couple of months ago and move forward, and it didn't quite make it in May. So, Board Member Levy, would you be available for that evening?
I am.
Okay. Board Member Hankins?
I am.
Okay. All right. So consider that done. We'll schedule a meeting next Tuesday at 5 p.m. Wednesday the 12th at 5 p.m. Okay? Is it? I'll be here. Okay. Okay, thank you. Jeez. Excuse me. Returned. Technology is great, except when the owner doesn't know how to use it. Anyway, there we go. Okay. So, could we have a motion for approval of the minutes? We can do these all
The
together.
agenda.
Oh, yeah, approval agenda. I'm sorry.
Before we move to approve the agenda, I just wanted to point out that item 1F, as in Frank, list me as the committee chair. So with that edit, I'm happy to move for the approval of the agenda.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carried. Okay, for policy review. The minutes. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, we want to approve the minutes for March 6th, April 10th, and May 8th. Do I have a motion for approval on all three?
Point of discussion, I wasn't here.
No, but since this isn't closed session, you had the opportunity to review the meeting. That's what we discussed at the last meeting, and then compare the video to the minutes, and then that way you would know if they were accurate or not. Did you have time to watch the March 6th and April 10th meetings?
No, I did not.
Okay. Then I would recommend we hold those over, and I move approval of the May 8th minutes.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second?
Okay, any discussion?
Quick question. So if we hold those over, Board Member Levy, so the other what's going to happen with the March 6th and April 10th approvals?
They would be moved to the next, they would be moved to the next meeting.
Yeah,
Actually,
it's not ideal, but it's fine. They just won't be approved and won't be posted until they're approved. But Board Member Hankins can watch the video and review the minutes, and then that way he can vote on whether or not they're accurate.
Okay, but I did watch the video, so we have a quorum, right?
Yep, then he
okay.
can abstain, and we can approve those this evening. Thank you for that clarification. I move approval of the March 6th and April 10th policy minutes.
I second. All those in favor say aye.
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 I abstain.
Okay. Motion carried. In the interest of transparency, I think we're going to postpone a few policies until we have a discussion and an agreement on gender language. So I'd like to postpone 2A, B because it's related to A, C, D because it's related to C, E, F, and G. Until we get clarification on the language, okay?
Actually, committee chair, policies let me make sure I have my notes right. Okay, so at our last meeting, let me scratch that. That'll be more confusing. 2A as in apple through D as in dog was what was held over at the last meeting so that the board could confer, as you correctly said, on gender language and what our collective position is. But we could still review policies on the current agenda, 2E, 2F, and 2H through 2L. None of those contain any gender language, so the only addition for the continued holdover would be policy 2G.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, question?
Yes, Dr. Garrison, discussion.
I agree, A, B, C, D, were the ones we held over.
Right.
I'm at a pause, which you said that G had?
2G.
2G had?
also. 2G
Yeah,
also,
so
yes.
the policies on this agenda that are brand new, which means they weren't reviewed in April or May, are policies 2E as in elephant through the end of the agenda, 2L as in Levy, and none of them contain gender language with the exception of policy 2G, which is professional staff suspension.
That's correct.
I'm sorry. Before I do trust what you're saying, Mrs. Levy. I just
No,
want-
double check me. I welcome that.
Just want to see where.
So,
Board President, you have a
well,
question?
he's looking for that. I didn't watch the last policy committee meeting. Sorry, guys, I haven't had time. It's
okay.
not that it's not important, I just haven't had time. So you want this to come before the entire board for the gender language? Am I
Yeah.
understanding that correctly?
Correct. Go ahead, Board.
Oh, if I may, it was discussed before the board renewed at the end of April, that the board didn't have a clear position on whether we would continue with current precedent of gender inclusive language, he, she, they, or if we would shift to gender erasure, so the student. So gender would no longer be present in policy. And it's my opinion, if we are going to move away from precedent, that is absolutely a decision the board as a whole can make to do that. But I think if we are going to do that, we need to be very intentional and have that conversation. And I would hope that we would want to hear voices from the community if we decide to make a change from current precedent.
Okay, thank you for that. My understanding at that discussion was that the policy committee was going to work on it and bring it to the board. So just if at some point, if we can just clarify that.
Right. No, I agree that that's what we should do, bring it to the board.
And I'm not saying I'm opposed to that, but what does that look like? So the three of us come up with a position on whether we continue with gender inclusive language or whether we shift to gender erasure from policy and then present that to the full board and then the full board weighs in. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, let's clarify a couple things. First of all, I hear what you're saying, Board Member Levy. I know where you're coming from, that it's gender inclusive language, and I believe that the discussions that I've had at this policy committee and in regular board meeting from time to time is that they, their, them, themselves, theirselves is all inclusive. It covers the whole world, including all the school, every children, every employee of this district. That is all inclusive. It's easy. It reads easier instead of the he's and the slashes and the slashes and the slashes and the slashes. Pretty soon, that sentence could be an extra line on the paper. So anyway, that's my opinion and my belief. So based on the dictionary.
No, but my question was, do you want the recommendation for whether or not we continue with our recent precedents of gender inclusivity, he, she, they, or if we shift to gender erasure? I believe the example you gave was the student, which eliminates gender. Is the request that the three of us, the policy committee, come up with a position on that? And then we submit that to the full board. I'm not against that. I'm just asking for clarification. And then we submit that to the full board, and then the full board has that discussion.
Brian? I just want to weigh in. I thought we're kind of getting stuck in the mud. I thought we did this at the last meeting. With all due respect, that this is where we're supposed to be doing, either at the board meeting or at this meeting tonight, is to clarify that position rather than kick it down the road so we can move on, rather than say, let's hold over and do it another time. So I don't know when the sleeves get rolled up, and let's figure it out.
No, actually, I'll read for you what the minutes that we just approved said, and this was one that we all attended May 8th. The approval minutes from the May 8th meeting state that the board had a discussion regarding his, her, their, and gender inclusion / erasure. Dr. Garrison suggested having a conversation with President Johnson regarding this concern and determining the next steps. And then the move to postpone items 2C as in cat through 2F as in Frank, which included the following policies, which I won't read. So that is where we left it at the May 8th. And my position is, it doesn't, and I could be wrong, please correct me, it doesn't seem like that happened. So our intention at the May 8th meeting was to have a full board discussion on our collective position on gender inclusive language or gender erasure. Since that didn't happen, the reason for postponing those slate of policies still exist. So what I was saying tonight is we should continue that because it has not been resolved, but go ahead and focus on the policies that don't include gender language, so we're still being productive. Now, if we want to change and not have this conversation immediately at the full board and have this as a committee and then submit that to the full board, I'm totally fine with that. I just want clarification that that is the will of this committee.
Thank you, Board Member Levy. Dr. Garrison, have you and Board President Johnson had a chance to have a conversation on this? Okay.
So we did have a conversation on this, and the conversation that me and Board President Johnson had focused around the considerations of they, them, as a collective, as a thought that this committee could consider. Board President Johnson, that was my recollection of our conversation, they, them. But before we could get into the policies itself, I heard you state that you want to bring this back to the full board. So that gave me, that's where we are now in this conversation. So that's what we discussed.
Board President Johnson?
Thank you. Yes, we had that discussion. It wasn't clear to me at that time that we were just thinking of bringing it before the entire board. I was under the impression it was going to be in policy committee. And one of the suggestions that I had for Dr. Garrison was to create a standalone policy that defines they, them as being all-inclusive of all of these, the currently used pronouns, that all of the ones that we can think of, and any future pronouns that may, people may decide to choose. I understand there are pronouns other than they, them, he, she that are not being used. That was just an idea that I had. But, it's certainly, if you want to, Chairman Nichols, if you want the full board to take it on, that's fine. I'm comfortable putting it on the next agenda. Or if it's something that the policy wants to handle. I like that we have committees because I like the committees doing the work for the board. That's.
Okay. Well, let's take it up this evening, and we'll move it to the next full board meeting. Fair enough.
I'm not sure what you mean by take it up this evening. Board
Let's-
President Johnson has recommended that we have a policy to identify our language structure. Did I capture that accurately? So since that policy has not been created, I don't know what you mean by take it up tonight.
We could create a policy tonight.
Oh. Well,
Couldn't
the
we?
only issue with that is it's not noticed on the agenda.
Okay. Go ahead, Board President Johnson.
Not to add any more work to this committee, but to my understanding, you're having a special meeting next week.
Correct. Be good. Yeah.
Just go ahead and flood yourselves with work.
Okay.
No, I mean, I'm joking, whatever you feel is appropriate, but if it's that burning of an issue.
Board Member Hankins, you have. Yeah.
Yes, I've heard a couple different things. I'm kind of confused, and I think Board Member Levy, we've all had legitimate concerns. I'm not sure is this a full board, or is this a policy? Or does a policy make it, and then it goes to the full board? And if so,
That's correct. So if we generate a new policy, which we absolutely have the ability to do, it's not active or live until it is approved by the full board. So the process is it can start in this committee. We create a policy, we move it on for the full board for a first reading. And then at the following meeting, it has a second reading. And then if it's approved after the second reading, then that becomes policy.
thank you very much. Then I motion that we create a policy to go for the first reading at our next full board meeting.
Could I ask for clarification before there's a second? it sounds like what you might want to do is request that a policy is generated. Well, first, we probably need to check in with the administration because I have an idea they may be helping with that to see if they're comfortable with coming up with a new policy by next Wednesday. So if yes, then you could direct, and I don't even think we need a motion since it's not listed on the agenda, but we could direct, just like when we're in the full board meeting, you can direct things back to committee. If we have consensus, we can direct the administration to present or to add that to our June 12th special policy meeting.
I agree with you, but it seems we were here before, that we gave direction to the board president and Dr. Garrison to create something for us to look at. So I just want to move things along so we can keep the inertia going on these decisions we have to make. And how we get there should be prudent. And I get going through what we need to do, but I just want to get the ball rolling.
So just
Go ahead, Dr.
Thank you.
Garrison.
So just a point of clarity. The direction was not for me to go back and write a policy, was to have a conversation with Board President Johnson. With that being stated, our conversations did center around the they-them conversation and bringing that back to the board, along with Mrs. Johnson's recollection around the possibilities of writing a policy. With that being stated, it's very clear that if you asking me to write a policy right now, without where the board is by the 12th, I'm just if you're asking me to write a policy by the 12th, where the board is at, I believe is possible. However, that'll be the take of what the administration will like to see, all right? And then naturally, that's how we look at a lot of policies. But clearly, there's some differences of beliefs around our pronoun opportunities that we have here in the school district. And like I said at our last policy meeting, we do have a strategic plan that supports a lot of the conversations that we've currently had. And whether we change these conversations is a much greater conversation, how we go about doing that. So I will be writing a policy that supports the strategic plan because that's what I have to govern myself. And again, if I hope this doesn't sound confusing because that's how I would have to guide my team in writing the policy around what we have, because we have the strategic plan that points us into using this type of language. Then, of course, if there's changes from there, correct me if I'm wrong, any board member that's up here, that'll be even a greater conversation because it could lead to other conversations. I'm just putting it on the table.
May I, Chair?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. What may be helpful is if we have, and there is precedence for this, if this is added as an agenda item for the full board, because sometimes it's helpful to get the pulse of the board and then direct it to the committee to do the work. So if the board is either going to say, unless there's a surprise, continue with current precedents, and we solidify that goes back to policy and we do that. Or the board would say collectively, no, we want to shift from our current precedents. And then that comes back to the policy. But the benefit is that the administration has direction. So Dr. Garrison, to his point, isn't writing from the perspective of the strategic plan if that is not in line with the will of the board, if that's helpful. So I recommend, Board President Johnson, I'm so glad you're here, if you and Vice President Nichols would be amenable to adding that as an upcoming agenda item for the full board so we can get consensus, and then it comes back to policy so that policy can be generated. And then we have clarity and we know how to move forward.
I agree with all that. I'm just wondering why it was on the agenda for tonight when it all got withdrawn. I mean, a lot of it, 2/3 of it got withdrawn. If that's was, and I understand, and I'm agreeing with you, I'm just wondering, we're losing a lot of time, I guess. And I'm not trying to speed things up. I just want things to move forward.
Thank you, Board Member Hankins. I'm amenable to having it put on the next board meeting for discussion and action. Yeah, moving.
But I am as well.
Okay, thank you. So, having said all that, then we will postpone 1A, B, C, D, and G.
Well,
Just G, not.
yeah, I was just out. Board president, I'm sorry, board. I got both presidents here right now. Board chair.
Yes.
There's so in 532.22, I would like to ask Mrs. Levy if she could, I've reviewed it, maybe I'm not catching it, but where would that have the acronyms, of course, he, she, they?
No.
Was it-
I'm
that's-
saying that for tonight's agenda, I would recommend that we continue to postpone items 2A through D and then 2G.
Correct.
So that wouldn't include 2F, which you just
Or
referenced.
2E.
All right. So tonight, we would be reviewing
Okay.
2E, F, and then H through L.
Correct.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm with y'all now.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
So I move that we postpone items 2A through D and item 2G until our July policy meeting.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Yes, that on July 2nd, that we have clarification to move forward from the full board on our next meeting. That this body can move forward with clarification that we're not, after our board meeting, our next full board meeting.
May I?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you so
Discussion's
much. So one, I completely hear where you're coming from, but we're not psychic. And what I mean by that is the full board will hopefully, everything goes well, give direction to the policy committee. And in the meantime, I'm certain that the administration and the chair are going to work on that policy. So a best case scenario, we will have a policy that governs language on July 3rd, and I would recommend we review that first, and then we can circle back and clear all of these from the deck. But I think we need to be mindful, if that doesn't happen by July 3rd, then we'll be in the same position with these policies. But hopefully by that point, we'll know clearer when that policy will be completed for our review.
I'm very good with that. Thank you.
Okay, any more discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carried. Okay, we move on to 2E, professional, policy 532, professional educator contracts. Is there any discussion?
I just have a couple items. In that second line, I'm pretty sure that policies should be a lowercase p. And then if we can jump down to like the halfway point on the right side of that second paragraph, limited term contracts. It says limited term contracts shall terminate up on. I'm pretty sure that should be upon. So if we can eliminate that space there. And I did have one question, but in the interest of time, Dr. Garrison, if I could just submit this now and you and your team could get back to us. The last sentence of the first paragraph, standard contracts, says, such renewals shall be exclusively subject to the provisions of Wisconsin Statute 118.22 and is not covered under the grievance procedure contained in the employee handbook. I'm just wondering what those, like the outline of what those differences are, where the gap is. And again, in the interest of time, we don't have to have that information tonight. But if it is things that are significant, we may want to include that. I'm not saying we hold the policy, because remember, we have 2 more times to touch it, even after it leaves this committee. But if I could understand just in broad strokes what the difference is between the Wisconsin statute 118.22 and our current grievance procedures contained. And then my other question is, State Statute 118.22 is listed to be cross-referenced, and I think I know the answer, but I just want to check. Will that become live once the policy is approved? You are nodding your head yes. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Shope. What was the correction you had, Board Member Levy? The fir-
Two very small ones in that first. The second sentence in the first paragraph, Board of Education policies, that should be a lowercase p. And then in the second paragraph, kind of halfway through, it says limited term contracts shall terminate up on, and I'm pretty sure that
That's
should be
upon.
upon.
Correct.
Yeah, that's all.
And I have one, too, in the previous sentence. At the beginning, it says, by the Wisconsin, the third sentence says, or third line, by the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, DPI, and I think we should delete the and, should be or other situation where the district anticipates. Delete it. I wouldn't or cover it. Or other situation where the district, yeah, okay. So, Mr. Shope, did you catch that? Okay.
Are you doing and slash or are you doing just?
Just or.
It should be or any other situation, not and.
Or any other, okay. Okay.
Oh, you gotta turn your mic on. Sorry, because they gotta be here.
Thank you, Mrs. Almendares. We're glad you're here. So yes, or any other situation. Okay. Good.
And can I get your question one more time? You said, what is the differences and what?
Yes,
are
thank
the
you for
current
asking.
grievances?
Can you outline the differences? So it says, again, such renewals shall be exclusively subject to the provisions of the Wisconsin statute 118.22 and is not covered under the grievance procedure. So whatever that difference is, and if it's significant, we may want to include it so people are aware, because they should, but they may not cross-reference both of those documents. So that's what we've done in the past, kind of outline the major differences. But if you and your team could provide that, that would be helpful.
Okay, any other discussion?
We could give you a high-level snapshot of why right now if you'd like, but I know that's not what you asked for. I'm just letting you know I got a tentative answer for that, but we can keep going.
I yield to the will of the chair.
Okay. So do we have a motion to approve?
I move
Policy five.
I move approval of policy 532, professional educator contracts, to move on to the full board for a first reading.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor of, say aye.
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 Aye. Policy approved to move to the new board, to the board, full board. Okay. Next policy is item 2F, 532.22, workers' compensation. Is there any discussion on that policy?
I have a couple questions. The first is, are employees eligible to cash out their sick leave upon leaving the district?
No.
Okay. And that is applicable for all employee groups?
Hold on, I just did this. Okay, sorry. So the only time that employees may be paid out sick leave is if they retire and a provision is made for them to be able to get paid for 60-plus days.
Okay. So in those instances, my concern is, are we charging employees who are injured on the job and accessing workman's comp? For example, if I'm injured on the job and I'm near retirement, I have to deplete a portion of those days while I'm receiving workman's comp before FMLA kicks in, if that's applicable.
FMLA is concurrent with any type of leave, including workers' comp. So if you're injured on the job and you're unable to work, FMLA will start when your first absence due to that injury begins.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that clarification. It threw me off because the bullet before that said starting day 61, but that doesn't apply to FMLA. So if I am near retirement and I'm injured on the job, I would need to deplete some of my accrued sick time to get compensated or made whole. So my concern is, in that scenario, we would be charging employees, or they would lose an asset because they were injured on the job, and that doesn't seem fair to me. And then my other thing was, what happens if an employee retires during the process? And by during the process, I mean that first bullet point, the employee will be paid income equivalent to the income the employee would have earned had the employee not been injured. This income will be generated by combining the value of the workman's comp benefit with the prorated accumulated paid leave, including accrued sick leave.
So workers' comp only pays about 60-something%, so that's where that third income comes in. That's all that they will compensate you. What the district does is to make you whole so that you bring home the same amount that you normally would, is that we prorate your sick leave to fill that gap between what workers' comp pays you directly and what you would normally take home. And that's actually a benefit because some employers do not. And so you just bring home what you're entitled to from workers' comp insurance.
But my only concern with that is if I was eligible for accrued leave payout upon retirement, but I'm using workman's comp because I was injured on the job, I'm taking from myself to pay myself. So I'm being made whole in my biweekly checks, but when it comes time to for retirement, I had to pay for that. And that's my concern. If someone was injured on the job, we're basically charging them if they are eligible to cash out their sick leave.
The only other option would be for us to strike that and state that the only benefit that they're eligible for is the percentage that workers' comp pays them, and then they don't have that option to be whole. We don't control that. The only way that we try to mitigate that is by allowing them to use any and all available leave, including accrued leave. You can't use accrued leave otherwise unless it's FMLA, because FMLA is concurrent with workers' comp. Then you're able to tap into your accrued leave balances. And so I hear what you're saying, but the only other way we could get around that is if we're just gifting them the difference.
So two things that I'm thinking about. One, it may be helpful if we give employees the option. Like if we can't get a workaround, they can either only take workman's comp because they know that they want to cash out with requirement for their accrued sick time. Or my question, kind of out of the box, we don't have insurance that covers that. So the injured employee who was injured on the job doesn't have to pay to make themselves whole. Don't we have insurance that would, like gap insurance, that would step in?
So workers' comp insurance is what's paying for all their medical bills and the time that they're laid out, that they're unable to work. The district offers long-term disability that is paid for by the district. Employees have the option to sign up for short-term disability that could kick in if they elected that benefit, because it's a voluntary benefit.
Okay, so it sounds like, unless I'm missing something, there's not an easy fix. But I think it would be helpful, and I'm sure I'm hopeful, this is laid out, like this scenario, because I think this is unfortunately a real scenario, is laid out in the employee handbook. But for the the intents of this policy, I think it would be helpful to cross-reference and maybe to include some language that just explained what you beautifully explained to me, that this is the scenario. Employees could either have the option to use their accrued sick leave to make themselves whole, or you would have to have signed up for short-term disability to make you whole without utilizing your accrued sick leave, because that can be cashed out if you're eligible at retirement. One, is everything I said accurate?
That is accurate.
Okay. I think it would be helpful to have that explained in this policy so people kind of understand what their options are, and then to cross-reference that short-term disability at the end of this policy.
Is this explained in the employee handbook, Mrs. Almendarez?
To be honest with you, because every scenario is so different, we don't outline every possibility. What we do when someone is injured at work and it results in lost time is that our benefits coordinator has a conversation with that employee and works through whether they have the short-term disability, what their specific situation is based on what the doctor is saying. Can they come back to work with the restrictions that they have, et cetera? So it becomes more of an individual assessment of that person's situation. I will say, although that is a very good example that Mrs. Levy brought up, we have only had one individual who opted to retire, who was injured, at work, where they were unable to come back for a significant amount of time. But I'm all in agreement for if that situation were to come up, that we have provisions in place. However, those are conversations because it's on a case-by-case basis, almost. Everybody's situation is different. Not everybody has accrued leave, and not everybody is going to be eligible for retirement. And the number of work-related injuries that we have that have resulted in lost time have not been significant where there has been an adverse impact on the employee since I've been here. I can't speak to before. But again, we do have a benefits coordinator that is very involved in that process and getting everything through to FMLA to ensure that their benefits remain intact, et cetera, which is another reason why it's so good that we do have them utilize any and all available paid leave, is because it helps offset the cost of any insurance premiums that are normally deducted from their regular paycheck.
Any other discussion? I have just a spelling error down on the second bullet point, third line. That should be subject to the rules and regulations of the carrier. I'm sorry?
Oh,
Pull
yes.
pull the S back to rules.
No sand, huh?
No sand. No, I didn't think that was part of the subject, so
Thank you.
you're welcome. So bottom line, are you advocating the change?
Yeah, I would like to see, and we're not going to try to play out every scenario, but I would like the outline captured in policy. I think that would be helpful, that you can opt to use your accrued leave or to not if you want to use that at retirement, but that means that it's just the workman's comp at that percentage. I think you said it's like 66% or something around there. Or short-term disability. And I'm hopeful that having it in policy, people aren't having short-term disability conversations for the first time after they're injured.
That's a good point, Board Member Levy. Would it be, Mrs. Almendarez, would it be possible to put a little, like a small, small spreadsheet, if you will, for lack of a better word, a spreadsheet, but just with examples so that so that the employee has something to look at. Maybe it's not exact, but they would have something to look at. Kind of, I think that's what you're
Okay.
talking about in a way, right? Board Member Levy?
No, not necessarily examples, because I'm a big proponent of having streamlined policy. But if we just said, and I'm sure Ms. Almendares is going to make it sound prettier than I am right now.
Okay.
But one, you can either, okay, you are injured. You can either use your accrued sick time to make yourself whole or defer to retirement if that's an option. So I'm thinking bullet points. Or two, if you have short-term disability, you can forego using your accrued sick time and utilize your short-term disability. So I'm just thinking like a sentence with a couple bullet points and then cross-referencing the information for short-term disability at the bottom of the policy.
I will research our short-term disability because sometimes what you run into, and it depends on the carrier and the policy itself, is that they expect that you exhaust all your leave if you're still employed before it starts covering. I want to make sure that that is not the case with our current policy, so that we don't conflict our policy with what our carrier. The other thing is, if I'm understanding correctly, benefits while on workers' compensation, that first bullet point, we're saying that up to and including the 60th calendar day, what we're including in that verbiage will be like option A, utilize any and all available paid leave, including accrued leave, to make whole the employee, basically to ensure that the employee is receiving a full compensation. Option B would be, if applicable, if the employee is currently enrolled in short-term disability, the option to utilize that in lieu of accrued leave. And option C would be for the employee to opt out of utilizing any of their available paid leave and only receive the benefit from workers' comp. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, and I think a beautiful position would be right under those bullet points.
Okay. So then, starting day 61, they're receiving their compensation directly from workers' comp.
If the maximum of accrued sick leave is 60 days, I'm assuming that's, okay, perfect. As long as, like you said, that doesn't conflict with our short-term disability carriers' restrictions.
And I will confirm that for you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Almond. Can we have a motion on this policy?
Oh, it would be incomplete. She's going to
Okay,
follow up
she's
that
gonna-
and then
okay.
add the language. So
Okay.
we would just put a pin in that one.
Okay. Hold over, yep. So hold over to July 3rd. Is that agreeable to you, Mrs. Almendares? To the July 3rd?
Yes.
Thank you. Next item is 2H, 532.5, professional staff outside third-party representation.
Is the floor open?
Floor is open.
Okay, thank you so much. So a few things. One, in that first paragraph, it talks about alleged misconduct may include but not limited to inefficiency or, and it goes immorality. And for those watching at home, we're talking about policy 532.4, professional staff suspension. Inefficiency is kind of vague. Unfortunately, I know a few people who are inefficient. I don't think that necessarily means they should be suspended. So I just want to make sure that we're communicating what we intend to communicate in our language. So if we could just start there.
Point of order,
Yes.
this is one of the policies that you guys
This is the one we postponed.
The
That's the one that has heat.
532.4.
Yes, he,
Oh,
she.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Right.
All right.
532.5.
All right, perfect. I have a couple things there too. So so just to give some context, we don't have time for that. I am not comfortable with, okay, so for those watching at home, this policy is professional staff outside third-party representation in personnel matters. So if you are facing a hearing, who you can bring with you to represent you, to support you, et cetera. I'm not comfortable with the changes that are proposed that says in the event of a professional licensed staff who is a member of the Beloit Education Association is called to a meeting, because we are restricting this ability from all employees to just licensed professional staff who are members of the BEA. What about our secretaries with the BSU? What about paras? I am not comfortable with saying if you have to go into a hearing, you can't take someone in with you. And then my other question is in that the portion that is highlighted in the pinkish color that's stricken, the start of that section, says if a union representative, are we still calling, is union still the appropriate term?
I would have to research that. That was not changed by me, so
Okay.
I can research it.
And that portion wasn't changed, and that's why I'm asking. That has been there since 2004, and we know since then, Act 10, et cetera. So I just want to make sure that our language is congruent and accurate. So one, is union still the appropriate term? And two, I'm not comfortable with limiting who can have representation at a hearing to only professional licensed staff who are members of the BEA. So those are my two concerns with this policy.
Thank you, Board Member Levy. Any other discussion? Oh, yes.
Because this is about professional staff, there's no mention of like the secretaries union or paras, for example. It is my understanding that the purpose of this policy was to ensure that employees who are members of BEA, of our organization, that they are afforded the opportunity to have said representation present if there's ever a personnel matter that may lead to disciplinary action. And so I believe that that is why it's exclusive to Beloit Education Association.
No, that's a good point. And I had the note on policy 532.4, but I think it may be applicable. So, okay, two things. One, we may want to cross-reference policy 546.2, which is support staff suspension and dismissal, because I think it's pretty easy for someone to say, oh, I'm in this scenario, and may not have a clear understanding of, are you professional staff or are you support staff? If I found this policy, I may think it applied to me. So if we cross-reference, like you said, the support staff, I think that would be helpful. And two, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, there are professional licensed staff that are not members of the BEA. And I'm all for affording people representation, but I don't want to penalize people because they made the decision not to join the BEA for something as basic as representation. That seems harsh to me in a way that doesn't need to be.
I agree. And I have honestly individuals, whether support or professional, if they would like to bring someone into any of these kinds of meetings, even though it's not necessarily BEA, we have made provisions for them to be able to do so. We understand that individuals have different needs, especially when it's a serious discussion that may involve discipline. And I am agreeable to put such verbiage in place. It was my understanding that this was exclusively to protect the rights of those employees. So if we want to expand on this, which we can, I'll be more than happy to do that.
I so appreciate that, and I just want to make sure, again, that our policy is congruent with our practice, and I'm so glad to hear that you're doing that. And you are absolutely right. Thank you for reminding me that there is a separate policy for support staff, so they don't need to be covered under this staff. All right, so with that in mind, what about our staff so let's just say teachers for professional licensed staff. We do have people who are on temporary license or emergency license. Are they included in professional licensed staff? Yes, okay, perfect. So I would recommend that we adjust the current recommendation to say, in the event of professionally licensed staff who are called, or professionally licensed staff who is called to a meeting. So if we could just remove the membership in the BEA requirement so that we're capturing all professionally licensed staff, knowing that those on a temporary or emergency license are included.
Okay.
I just like to reiterate, anytime an employee would like to have someone represented, of course, we wouldn't turn them down. I think where I get, so you did bring up a good point. 546.2 is a good cross-reference that we can definitely cross-reference here.
Right.
But I don't want, I guess, to me, all of the policies will start sounding alike. If we start adding language from each of the policies to be, I'm just trying to figure out, we have a policy already in place that shares that we can do that. We would just be adding it to each of the policies, right?
Well, I don't think we would run into that because we're not merging the language from that policy. We're just cross-referencing it at the bottom. Because if I'm in a situation where I'm like, can I bring somebody, can I not? Hopefully people are looking to policy for that type of direction. And if they read professional staff, they might say, oh, I'm support staff. That doesn't apply to me. What do I do? And I'm just saying, as a courtesy, if we have that cross-reference at the bottom, like this policy doesn't govern you, but this cross-reference one does, it might save them some time in looking through the policy catalog to find what meets their needs.
That goes back to the whole numbering thought, and I'm not saying that this is right or wrong right now, but it gets so it's just so many.
May I?
Go ahead, Mrs. Onderneris.
Thank you.
You may.
The only concern I have with those changes is when we read in the first paragraph, the last sentence, the right to representation is reserved for those who participate in membership with the BEA. And so are we saying that we would strike that?
Yes, that's my recommendation.
Okay, just clarifying. Oh, and it does have the his or her right on that one. Should we be tabling this one as well?
I would say yes, for the reasons we just discussed, but it sounds like some work needs to be done to it.
Thank you.
Yes and yes.
Okay. Would we also be striking the last sentence? These rights do not extend participation to broader groups.
I would say yes, because it's not accurate, because like we said, they do extend, so we don't want our policy to conflict.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, next up is 2I, 533, policy 533, employee recruiting and hiring. Discussion?
I feel like I've been talking a lot, so I'll yield the floor if Board Member Hankins has any comments on 533.
Not at this time, go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. That first sentence, just to accurately reflect what the board does, I believe it should read, the Board of Education has the responsibility of approving employee recommendations for all employees in the district. For employees in the district, instead of for employing all employees. I think that can get kind of vague because we don't have a hand in the entire employing process. So we are at the very end. So if we could have that clarification. And then at the end of that sentence, it says the board assigns the responsibility for employee recruitment and recommendation to the superintendent. Or if we want to put recruitment, selection, and recommendation, just so we can be clear in what actually happens. And then the third paragraph that's highlighted in green for addition, marital state in that second line. I think that, should probably be status. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, any other discussion? So we'll postpone that till,
Oh, no,
I'm
I
sorry.
think it could be good to go, but forgive me, I wasn't looking ahead far enough. What we've done in current precedents is that where we can, where it's not too cumbersome, like 3-4 pages, that we have rolled the rules into the policy. So if we look at rule 1, 2, and 3, they're each like a few paragraphs, and those paragraphs are really short sentences. So what I would recommend is, we just discussed 533 with minimal edits. So if that's amenable to the group, we would be good. But for example, we would potentially retire 533 Rule 1 and use the header professional educator recruitment / selection procedures. Use that as a header in the main policy 533. Does that make sense?
okay.
So instead of having 4 policies talking about the same thing, we'll have policy 533, but the content of 533 Rule 1 will be rolled into that main policy using the current title as the header. So unless anyone objects to that. All right. 533 Rule 1, under application, there are 7 items. I would recommend that we adjust the order to be 1, 4 through 7, and then put 2 and 3, because it talks about submitting information, it talks about the posting, and then your letters of recommendation. So basically, we're talking about letters of recommendation before we talk about the job being posted. So just if we could make it linear to how the process goes, I think that would make more sense to the reader. And then this is very small, but sometimes we use superintendent or designee, and sometimes we use district administrator. I don't know if there's a preference, but just so we can be consistent on that. And I'm talking fast because I know I have to leave soon. And then under interviews, it says interviews shall be scheduled after online applications have been screened. Varying stakeholders shall be involved in the interview process. I'm just not really clear on what that means. So just some thoughts there of, do we need to make that more clear of who stakeholders are? And if it's too nuanced, it may be fine just as it is. And then again, if we're taking Rule 2 and retiring that and rolling this into the main policy with the previous title, as a header. The only thing I have on that last sentence, and again, this is currently 533 Rule 2, if the request for additional positions is approved, the superintendent shall submit, I would say, an employment recommendation, just so we can be consistent of what we review during the policy portion of our meeting. And then the last thing that I have is currently located in policy 533 Rule 3, which again will be rolled into that main policy using the current title as a header. just the green portion, the superintendent reserves the right to assign or transfer direct employees based on district needs. When the district determines, I think it should be when the superintendent determines, because district seems very vague without that administrator to be more explicit. So when the superintendent determines that a transfer is necessary, what the current proposal is, the transfer assignment will be at the discretion of the district. I think it would be more appropriate to use language from that main policy. And so what I'm recommending that reads is, when the superintendent determines a transfer is necessary, persons recommended for employment, transfer, or promotion shall meet or exceed the established or posted qualifications and shall be able to perform the essential functions of the position with or without reasonable accommodations. And again, that's verbatim the language from the main policy. And this is not against you, Dr. Garrison. I think you have beautiful judgment, but we don't write policy for people, we write, I'm just not comfortable with saying the superintendent determines the transfer is necessary. The transfer assignment will be at the discretion of it currently says the district, but for all intents and purposes, that would be the superintendent. And if we left it like that, the superintendent could decide to make a para a principal or and hopefully nothing wild like that would happen. Dr. Garrison, I know you wouldn't do that, but again, policy isn't written for individuals. So if we could mirror that language from the main policy, I think that would be appropriate.
From 533.
Yeah, and where it starts with persons recommended for employment, transfer, or promotion, and then ends with or without reasonable accommodations. Just copy and paste that language, just to reiterate, there are some parameters for transfer, but it is, within these parameters, the superintendent determines that based on the needs of the district.
Go ahead,
Thank
Board
you.
President Johnson.
I actually put in a call to Rob Bukema earlier today regarding this one because I had some questions about it complying with state statutes. And he was going to get in touch with Dr. Garrison. It was a little late. I sorry for getting to this today. Things have been a little busy, but so I don't know what the result of the conversation was.
Sure, we were only, and I know we're not at 5:30 because it's specifically, the questions that we had was in reference to 533, Rule 3.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna,
Isn't that where we're at? Rule
Yeah.
3?
yeah,
We started with 533, but we rolled over to 530, all the ones, twos, threes, and fours.
being rolled into the main
Yeah, right.
with previous titles listed as headers.
correct.
Okay.
Were you gonna come back or no?
No, I have golf.
Okay, I just wanted to see where, thank you. So,
Didn't mean to get you off track.
no. I just want to make sure.
Go ahead,
we
Dr.
deal with the
Garrison.
transfer and all that. So there's a couple of things in this 533 Rule 3. Again, Chair, we can go through each rule and still have discussions as we kind of get to this rule specifically.
Okay.
Me and the lawyer, we can have additional conversations about this rule. As it pertains to the roles and responsibilities of the superintendent, of course, we know that there are many rules. I mean, there are many roles that I have to fulfill as a district administrator. And one of them is moving staff based off of the needs of a district. And so me and Mr. Bukema, and all due respect, we didn't have enough time to kind of go into the details around your specific question, whether or not we were in violation of any state statute. I think that was kind of what it was floating around. In our general conversation, Mr. Bukema does not believe that I'm in any violation of any state statutes because the district administrator, again, I have to maximize the resources of a school district daily by minute. And there's decisions that I have to make daily by minute at times to, better position us to be successful. So at the current time, he doesn't believe, but, we only had a 15-minute or so conversation. that really detail this specific conversation, this specific part. I will still need to go back to him and say, hey, did you research more? Is there anything else that I'm missing? Again, my role as a superintendent is, again, it's vast, and I transfer and I move people around based off of needs of the district quite frequently. As a case in point, even this year when we had to, close a program around, move teachers to another building because we needed them at another space to serve the students. And so these things happen daily from a day-to-day basis. Mrs. Almendarez, do you want to add anything to that?
I just wanted to clarify the spirit of this policy in no way refers to us promoting someone. This is when we're talking about transferring. The assigning and transferring refers to, for example, just this year, we moved paras from Converse to Merrill to meet the needs of that ID room. They're comparable. They're lateral transfers. It's just who they report to in what building. We're not promoting or demoting when we talk about transferring. It is within their employee group and does not involve a change in compensation. Those would come to the board as promotions or demotions. So I just wanted to clarify that transfer is compliant because we are not moving people outside of what they were. If you were hired as a teacher, you will continue being a teacher.
I also think there may be a need, since the conversation came to me when it did, there may be a need for us to separate promotion from this specific title here, because it says employee hiring, transfer, promotion, and compensation adjustment. Maybe there's a need for us to separate or take out the word promotion or add something here to delineate the separation, because I don't want there to be any confusion in the policy. But that was going to be a greater detailed conversation here at the board level. I mean, at the committee level, before I start just taking stuff out and creating a whole nother policy. I got my own notes here that I wanted to share about this specific policy, but maybe that's a space too where we can just be more specific in the policy around promotion, be more specific in the policy around transfer, be more specific in the policy around employee hiring, so that it won't feel too different. I did have some conversations around, well, I do want to talk about the compensation adjustment piece as well. And that needs to be flushed out as well. So I don't think this policy is, as it stands, 533 Rule 3 specifically, is tight enough to move to the full board in this current space. 533 Rule 3, to be specific. Board Chair.
I believe I agree because it's it uses promotion. The word promotion is in there and compensation adjustment, and that goes to what Mrs. Almendarez said. That would be a promotion or a demotion or a change in salary or wage, and that would come to the full board for approval or not. So yeah, that the title of that is, I think, is misleading. I agree with it. Yes.
Oh, I just wanted to thank Ms. Almendarez for her explanation. Quite honestly, I'm not really concerned about the teachers or paraeducators. I know that they are needed wherever you put them, and they are needed everywhere. I'm specifically more concerned about the transferring of administrators.
Oh, okay.
But in the superintendent's contract, and I have the right to move administrators around, they have an administrative contract where they actually go work. Again, that's where they're placed.
So that I understand, since I was not part of that conversation, are we speaking about being able to move a principal or an assistant principal from one building to the next, or are we speaking about moving an administrator from a principal to an assistant principal position?
Yes, and yes, and yes, and yes. I'm just, this doesn't specify, it just says employee, it doesn't specify what employee class we're talking about. And
Yeah.
so that's, again, another reason why I reached out to Rob, because it needs clarity and wanted to make certain that we are complying with state statutes. And it's not going to hurt to have, yep.
Right. Yeah, again, I agree with Dr. Garrison's summation that, you know, the title, the title doesn't really match the verbiage in the actual policy. Yes, Mrs. Shope, I know you have an answer.
Well, the title, I think, is referring more to the first paragraph, because the first paragraph almost literally is verbatim the title in terms of employment, transfer, promotion, compensation, adjustments. So I think that's where the title came from, but feel free to change the title to whatever you would prefer. But I just wanted you to know, I think that's where the title came from, and that's why it's so long.
Yeah, I think adding that paragraph kind of changed the flow of the policy. Is that a fair statement? Okay. So,
So can I make a recommendation? Board
Sure,
Chair? Thank you.
absolutely.
Not like a recommendation for you all to just a discussion, I guess just to say. Is it possible that we hold on this policy, 533, Rule 3, go back, rewrite it so that it's broken down, so that we were talking about specific ideas here, along with, again, me having some further conversation with our attorney, so that it's a little more clear than what it is right now. Again, I didn't want to
Okay.
get into changing policy without having this discussion. Otherwise, it'll lead to more discussion. And so that's, if you allow us to do that at the district level, to bring this back to you, to me, that'll be a great opportunity for us.
I think that's a great idea. I would welcome that we postpone all four of these until we and yeah, look at them. I'm not being critical. I just sometimes I think we all get rushed. There's so many things going on, and so maybe it wasn't quite ready to bring this up yet. But we did, and we've had a great discussion. So the good news is we can always hit the brakes a little bit and relook at it.
So if I am understanding correctly, when we go back to revise these 4 policies, we are moving Rule 1, Rule 2, and Rule 3 as revised onto 533, and we will be retiring Rule 1, Rule 2, and Rule 3?
So I'll work through that with me and Michelle, but we can't retire anything until there's a
replacement.
a replacement. And
Yeah.
so the board has to, well, the chair has to, of course, make a motion and then there's approval. Right now, we're not at that retirement phase because we want to go back and make some corrections and then come back and put them all into one.
Okay,
sense.
thank you for clarifying.
No problem, no problem. I know this is our first go at it together too, so.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mr. Hank- Board
I
Member
was just
Hankins.
wondering that too, as a point of order. So we just go back as if not, I mean, the current policies just stay in place, correct?
Correct.
Correct. Yep.
We will bring this back on July 3rd with corrections, just like we would do like tonight. We have had some input that we can add, just so that the board can see it. The chair, of course, that the committee can see it. And then we can go into retirements and all that kind of stuff afterwards.
Sounds good to me.
Great. Okay. Well, first, so item 3, next meeting date, or it's going to be next meeting dates. Again, we're going to have a special policy committee meeting a week from tonight, June 12th, 5 p.m. to 6-ish or 6:30 or whatever. Focus is the code of conduct policy that's been sent to all of us.
There may be some other policies as well.
And then, and yes, and some of these other, right. And also, the next regularly scheduled policy meeting will be Wednesday, July the 3rd, 2024, at 5:30 in this boardroom. So we're on to, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I just have something I'd like to bring up.
Yep.
Somewhere in the future, Chairman Nichols, and we kind of touched on it, actually was part of the policy of recruitment, and I know the superintendent, as I'm learning, has a lot on his plate. Recruitment, and let's just go back to last night, and we talked about referendum, and Megan brought up, that it's part of all of us to help in that. I'm not sure I think maybe it'd be a discussion item for this policy board, as long as recruitment's under us, for teachers, and not to actually hire, but to get out. I remember being at Whitewater and the job fairs being there, and I know they go on. And maybe the board could take an active role as a subcommittee in promoting the Beloit School District and what we have to offer sometime down the road in the future, just to help out admin with their guidance and help to sell the school district to available teachers. Thank you.
Since we're having, thank you.
Absolutely.
The HR department does do a lot of the recruitment, and they do a lot of the conversations out in the general public, going to recruitment fairs. Our principals also do a lot of that work. Of course, you all being committee people and also members of the broader community, that is part of your responsibility to promote our district. And so in a positive manner, I think a better way just as we have materials that you could actually have when you are talking with people in the community around who we are, what we're about, what we would love to see continue here in the school district. And that information gives us a guidelines to kind of follow that we use. Because it's one thing to say, we want you to come work for the school district of Beloit, but why? And we have all that information, right? It's one thing to say, we want you to come work for the school district of Beloit, and here's some of the compensation information. All of that is, we have a lot of the information that I think board members could have to support people coming to work for us. But we do a lot of recruitment already in the HR department. Ms. Almendares, did you?
Yes, so that's great. If you want to be involved, we do have a list of annually the different career fairs that take place at higher ed or other entities, whether it be Rock County or throughout the state. And we'll be more than happy to share those that we will be participating in. And those that you would want to take on your own, we do have the whole setup. So if that's something that you're interested in, we'll definitely can meet with you. And so you have the tablecloth, the displays, the goodies that we have on our table, et cetera. So, and we would love to have one or all of you join us as we venture to all these locations. So thank you for offering.
And thank you. I knew that it was professionally set up. I wasn't trying to say it wasn't. I just think it'd be a good tool. I mean, we're volunteers. I know we get a stipend, but I think there'd be a time and place that I would love to go out and, with training, be able to sell the district. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Motion for adjournment?
I move that we adjourn.
I second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Adjourned at 6:52 p.m.